What's up, everybody? Welcome into a new edition of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. And you know that Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. So find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. You can see the smiles on our faces if you're joining us on CHSN's YouTube page as we bring you this podcast. K.C. Johnson, Cam Smith, K.C., preseason game number 1 in the books for this Bulls team. They got a very dramatic win against the Cleveland Cavaliers in Cleveland to start things off in preseason. And so a number of different areas that we can go to with today's pod. But just to give some people some context on things, Casey and I decided on what the topics will be, and we didn't compare notes in terms of what these topics will be. So we're going to give 3 areas of 3 players that really stood out to us in preseason game number 1 for the Bulls. Of course, they pulled off that last-second win against the Cleveland Cavaliers, 118-117. My heart goes out to Thomas Bryant, because he tried to be the hero a couple of times for the Cavs. And first, it was Dalen Terry. And then second, it was Jalen Smith finishing off that win for the Bulls. So, Casey, this was something watching that game where it's like, yes, basketball is back. But then also, too, we see what Billy and the team has been prepping for in training camp. And it was on display in that first preseason game.
Yeah, Cam, so we promise we're not going to go this in the weeds on every game throughout the season because we're just so starved for basketball to analyze. And we are taping this on Wednesday. So if you're listening to this after the Thursday game, because the Bulls then have their home preseason opener against the same Cavaliers team, you know, some of these may be a little bit outdated. We will try to make big picture out of the points we're making off of the game. Yeah. But like I said, we're just so starved for basketball, and it was nice to watch Bulls basketball again on Chicago Sports Network. So
yes, sir.
Yeah, we win or lose, it's more about style of play and big picture stuff. But yeah, we got a list, and I always kick it to the host. I'm an assist guy.
Okay.
Well, not really. I'm a gunner, but this time I'm going to assist to you and let you take the first one on your list.
Okay.
I'm going to guess, maybe it'll surprise you, but I'm going to guess you're going to take the obvious one. But let's go. What are your 3 takeaways? What's your first of your 3 takeaways, Cam?
KC said after the shot from our opponent that we're facing off against, no, I'm taking it out of the net, like outlet it to me. Cam, get on the wing. I got the point guard duties. But it's all good, KC. Let's get it. So, yes, I'm going to go with the obvious name, and Matas Buzelis, Mr. I want to win NBA Most Improved. And it's one thing to hear Matas talk about the added weight, the added strength. It's another thing to hear teammates discuss that and just how he's more mature and he wants to be coached harder. But it's another thing to watch it on display. And people are going to say, Cam, it's preseason, relax, calm down, dude. And I get it. It's almost damned if you do, damned if you don't when it comes to summer league, when it comes to preseason. But this is different for me when it comes to Matas against the Cavaliers in the first preseason game, because this dude definitely has his goals and wants to hit each and every mark in year number 2. And what we saw last night, the 19 points, the block shots, the rebounds, the physicality that he played with on the defensive end, him getting downhill and scoring at the rim. Those are all marks that you should have in your mind of how this dude has really transformed his body and gotten stronger in the offseason. And Casey, what I loved about Matas last night was that when you saw last year, his rookie season, some drives, especially in the first half of the season, he was being knocked off of his driving line where a defender would physically just knock him off of his approach to the basket. You didn't see that last night, and he got stronger even going back to last season in the second half of the season with that. But when he was dead set on getting to the rim, there was no stopping him. And so that's one aspect of what Matas showed last night. But then the other aspect was his outside shooting. He was a guy that was able to knock down some threes and be fluid with the shot in catch and shoot situations, whether it was half court or transition. And again, this is someone that doesn't smirk or chuckle when he says that he wants to be NBA Most Improved, when he says that he wants to be coached like an all-defensive player. And so watching him last night, I'm like, yes, this is the Matas that we've been waiting for to see.
Yeah, absolutely. What stood out to me was his decision-making. He was very decisive, very aggressive. He even took that transition 3, did not hesitate on that shot. And you talk about, I like your point about the driving lines, but I had a point in my notes about drives that was similar but different. He actually had a move where he decelerated on his drive and kind of, changed the defensive tempo. And, usually last year he was always one speed, not always, but a lot of times he was one speed, but he kind of had like a drag step, deceleration move. And that's the kind of stuff that throws defenses off. And that's the stuff of sign of maturity and a growing player. So take it past the 19 points and 8 rebounds and the statistics and more about what we saw in terms of decisiveness, decision-making. Right. That's the stuff that if you're a Bulls fan, you've got to be very, very excited about. You know, Billy Donovan's always hammering about seeing him on the glass and, 8 rebounds, and he was in on some others that he didn't get. So that's a huge sign. So, yeah, glad you took the obvious one. And I'm gonna steal the shiny new toy for my first one before you grab it. So let's get into 𝗻𝗁cihe because, last time we saw him was in Summer League, and he had a pretty disastrous debut by all accounts, including his own. And we talked about his response to that in Game 2. This was not a disastrous debut. This was an impressive debut. What I liked from him is, he's not in that first two-wave rotation of 10 players. But when he got in, he, again, just like Matas Buzelis, very decisive in his decision-making. We talked coming out of the draft camp about his free throw rate and how that was a statistical outlier in his one season in Germany, and how, his ability to get to the line, and you immediately saw a guy in attack mode. He had that one time where he missed his shot and he followed his shot and got somebody got an offensive rebound and he cut and he got the feed and he went right to the rim. So very, very aggressive. He's kind of a deceptive player because he looks like he's kind of coasting out there sometimes, and he looks like he's not competing that hard, but he is. And you see that with his propensity to get to the free throw line and draw fouls and seek out contact. Again, that's only going to improve as he understands the NBA game and obviously gets stronger as a player. But I don't know about you, but I was overall pretty impressed with the way he played his first preseason game.
Look, I was taking in all this to the radar of 𝗻𝗁cihe when he walked in onto the court, because I'm like, all right, this is his chance coming off of Summer League to really not only get his feet wet, but to get a little more respect back on his name. And everybody knows that, the dunk with Johnny Furphy, I get all of that. But Noah has, I think for me, watching him last night, he really took that personally, right? And so there was one moment where he drove the lane against Thomas Bryant and went up for a two-hand dunk, eventually got fouled in the air, but he wanted bad intentions with that dunk. And it felt like, okay, this is my moment. I have a clear lane. I'm going up with two hands. Thomas Bryant checked him with the body. But still, Noah elected to try and go with the left hand after the contact, after the whistle was blown. But it's that type of aggressiveness that really stood out to me from 𝗻𝗁cihe. And people will look at him, as you mentioned, 𝗻𝗁ci, with the stoicism that he plays with. They're like, is he playing hard? Does he really want to be out there? No, if you just look at his impact and what he was able to do, and also some of the catch and shoot threes that he had as well. I mean, the one from the corner that he made, I'm like, all right, okay, Noah, you're not hesitating. You're getting right into that thing. And so I think that's a credit to not only him, but his teammates of making sure that his confidence level stays high as possible. And they're encouraging him throughout. And so seeing him finish with the 8 points and 5 rebounds here, that's great. And of course, 𝗻𝗁ci and I are going to talk about this throughout the pod when it comes to numbers with these guys. It's more so about feel and how they look on the court. And the feel and look for Noah, and then even going back to Matas, you're like, yeah, these dudes are ready for the upcoming season. And they understood who they were playing against in the Cleveland Cavaliers. I know that Darius Garland was not on the court, but Donovan Mitchell's still out there. Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen is still one of the favorites to come out of the East. And so they wanted to make sure that they stepped onto the court and got right to business. And when Noah got his time in the second half, he was right there doing it. All right, 𝗻𝗁ci, I got to go with my second guy. All right. I'm a point guard. So I can't shy away with the point guard. So I got to go Trey Jones. Like, Trey Jones is, for me, a guy that we saw come over from San Antonio in the trade deadline with a 3-team deal for Zach LaVine and the Kings, and really assumed his role with a level of poise that it just runs in the Jones family. Like, his older brother 𝗫𝗏ce is a consummate point guard, one of the best backup point guards, and not even backup point guards. I don't want to minimize 𝗫𝗏ce's impact and his role in the NBA, but one of the best point guards in the NBA in terms of how to run a show. But Trey Jones, it just felt like he's just more comfortable with this unit, with this system, of course, with him being a Chicago Bull because he signed that 3-year deal in the offseason, but he hit the ground running last night against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And people want to hear the stats, and I'll throw it out there for what he is. But again, it's not more so about the stats. It's more about how he performed and just his comfort level out there. So 19 minutes, 10 points, a couple of assists. He was 4 or 5 from the field. But I've always loved about Trey is that he just finds ways to score. Even though he's undersized as a point guard, he can get into the lane and finish at the rim, but also set up guys, especially on fast breaks and a couple of steals and providing ball pressure just to turn quick defensive steals into transition points.
Yeah, and, I talked to Trey last week after practice about his return here because, when the season ended, we've all seen how crowded the guard picture is, and obviously re-signing 𝗵𝗏 Giddey was the priority. And there was, some talk, including from me, that, there might not be room for this guy. And I said, are you surprised to be back here? And he said, no, because he understood how quickly he earned this coaching staff's trust. I mean, you just see how much Billy Donovan gravitates towards him. You don't want to read too much into rotational decisions yet, because especially with Coby White, not playing. But he was a sixth man last night. It's clear he's got a trust factor with Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan loves low turnover people. Both Trey and his brother are notorious for taking care of the basketball. He's just a smart decision maker, makes the offense move well. And I agree with you. He's always surprised me with his ability to get his own shot and score. That's not his priority, but it's something he can do. So, yeah, just, he kind of picked up where he left off. And let's not forget, his season last season ended with that injury. So, he talked to me last week after practice about being fully healthy, and you could see it last night. So I'm going to grab my other point guard. I don't even know if you call him a point guard. You just call him a jack of all trade guards. But before you take him, I mean, it's like we're not going to cover much new ground here, but it's like every time you start thinking about Ayo Dosunmu is like an afterthought. Like, all right, Josh Giddey's the big payday. Mm-hmm. They bring back Trey Jones because he's got trust with Billy Donovan. They have trade talks surrounding Ayo Dosunmu in the offseason. Yeah. Oh, he's going to have a lesser – man, the dude just comes in. He's irrepressible. You cannot stop this guy. Every time he came in, particularly that first rotational stint, after a really poor start by the starters, they were throwing the ball over the gym, a lot of turnovers. Ayo just came in, completely calmed things down. At one point, I didn't check the final box, but at one point he was a plus 14. Both of his first two rotational turns were that same Ayo Dosunmu two-way presence, making impactful plays at both ends. He finished plus 7. Our esteemed producer Kevin Lapka just told us. We got a team here. We got a squad here.
Yeah, we make it work. We make it work.
But he was plus 14 at one time, and just look, his impact at both ends. You just felt it, and I've always loved the demeanor with which he plays. I know you had a chance to sit down with him for a long time in media day, talking about his whole career and just his disposition. He's so serious, so tough-minded, so unflappable. I mean, every time he's out there, you just feel like, all right, everything's gonna be okay. And I feel like that he's gonna have a pretty prominent role on that second unit, even when Coby White comes back.
Look, Ayo is someone that just reminds me of the city of Chicago. Like, he is so Chicago in what he does, his personality and how he plays. And just watching him, of course, people had questions, okay, how he's going to return from the shoulder surgery, which ended his season, right? Didn't play the full 82, was limited to about 46 games, I believe, KC, last season. But this dude, we talked about this pods ago back in the offseason about some video, some photo that we saw of him working out in Spain during the 𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗹 event, and he looked really physically just built, in great shape. And I'm like, all right, I want to see how it looks, not only training camp, but preseason. And as soon as he hit the floor, he didn't miss a beat. And the one thing that I know about Ayo, since I've covered him and known him since he was a freshman in high school, is that he's always sure of himself. He's never been someone, personality-wise or just mentality-wise, that was unsure or just nervous. At least he doesn't show it, right? So when he stepped on that court last night, finished with 12 points, and shout out to Kevin Lapka again and KC with the plus 7, with Ayo finishing plus 14 at one point. The shot selection that he had, the drives that he had going downhill. And I know that his jump shot is something that he really wanted to improve. He went 2 of 2 from 3 and also 5 of 6 from the floor. So it was the rim attacks, how he was able to play within the offense when that ball was swung over to him for those threes. And I know that's a big part of what he worked on this offseason, was improving and raising that 3-point percentage. Because again, it just adds another dimension to his game. And he's just one of those dudes that you need on the court. Like, I don't care what the situation is, you need Ayo Dosunmu on the court, especially defensively, because he just disrupts so much on the offensive end for opponents. So I wanted to go the Ayo route instead of going Trey Jones, but I knew at some point he was going to get in. He made our top 3, so I'm glad you went with Ayo with your second pick on that, KC. Here's my third pick, and this is going to be an interesting one. I'm going to go with Dalen Terry for my third pick. And this is why I'm going with Dalen Terry on this. This is a dude that has readied himself for this upcoming season. We know the forward group, for this Bulls team is depth heavy. They have a lot of names, a lot of bodies there. But Dalen was able to show me, kind of similar to Matas, right? On some of those drives, he was just more sure of himself as opposed to getting into the lane and being left without a decision. Dalen attacked the rim, got to the basket, helped out on rebounding, and of course, the block on Thomas Bryant, where he just took the challenge with Thomas Bryant for some reason, thinking he was LeBron James and barreling down in the open court against Dalen Terry, and Dalen sent the shot out of bounds. So he wants to really assume this role off of the bench within Billy Donovan's rotation, where it's not a drop-off on the defensive end, but also he's able to provide a spark offensively with his athleticism and also how he can drive to the lane. So Dalen, for me, just watching him, not so much about the numbers, but just the comfort that he had and more so the aggression and strength going towards the rim stood out to me. And he's a different dude now. Like, he's not rocking 25 anymore. He changed the jersey number to number 7. And I was caught off guard for a little bit when I, looked up after I was playing with my daughter, KC, and I'm like, wait a minute, who's number 7? I'm like, oh, Dalen, I forgot he changed his number to number 7. But Dalen gets the third spot for me.
All right, yeah, and I know he's listed as a guard, but we've talked about it many times. I mean, he's technically a wing, and he has the length to guard forwards, and you saw it obviously on that last high-profile block. I talked on this very podcast a couple weeks ago about how I had heard that he'd had a really strong offseason, really worked hard on his shooting. He just seemed like a very confident player last night, and his selection kind of dovetails nicely into my final selection because, again, we don't want to read too much into rotation stuff, but he technically was playing forward in that second unit. Unless they're playing 3 guards, but he was out there with Trey Jones, Ayo, Julian Phillips himself, and Zach Collins, and that leads into my third one. Is I was a little surprised Patrick Williams was not in the first 10 players in Billy Donovan's initial rotation, and let's remember that does not include Coby White, who obviously is going to be in that rotation. So I'm going to talk to Billy. We're again taping this Wednesday morning. I'm going to talk to Billy today at practice about that. What I did like is when Patrick Williams did get the nod, which was to start the second quarter, he came in immediately. And this is kind of a consistent theme throughout this podcast. Just like Essengue and Matas Buzelis was very decisive in his decision-making, very aggressive. That's been kind of the inconsistent area for him, obviously, through his first 5 seasons, is bringing that on a nightly basis and in a more consistent basis. So it's only one game. We don't want to get out over our skis, but I did like the way that he played. But I was, if you start doing the math, if he's 11th man with Coby White in street clothes, does that mean he starts the season not in the rotation, which would be a huge fall from grace? Look, Billy can't play everybody, and all of a sudden, I've talked many times about, I think this team's depth is a major strength. I mean, you've got maybe no lead dominant stars, but you've got 11, 12 solid NBA rotation players, and that's going to be kind of the Bulls' MO, is to try to wear teams down. Look, they're going to need everybody throughout the season. As we all know, slumps happen, injuries happen, back-to-backs happen, but it's interesting to see that at least initially, Patrick Williams is not in the rotation, the main rotation, but then when he did play, I liked what I saw. So what that means moving forward, we'll get some more answers, obviously, as the preseason games continue, but that was my initial takeaway.
No, I'm with you on that, KC. It was just, and I wonder, depending on, the ankle injury that he had a couple of days ago in camp, and wasn't sure on what his status would be. Not much so on the status, but how much time he would play. But I'm curious to see how many minutes and where he sits in that rotation on Thursday's game against the Cavaliers back at the United Center. But it's just the feel of it, right? And we're going to continue to hammer this throughout preseason. It's the feel and look until we get towards the start of the season on October 22nd against the Pistons. But a lot of these rotational guys, just things not only that they need to improve upon, but just what their mentality is coming into these games. And you can see it from the Patrick Williams to the Dalen Terry. I'm not even going to include Matas in this group, but you have a number of guys, Noah Essengue, as we touched on as well, that know that they're really competing for minutes and especially rotational spots within Billy's lineups. And so you have to really take that to heart, and you can't half step once you step onto that court. And we saw that last night of these guys being sure of themselves on their drives. There were a couple of things that stood out to me with Patrick and him being able to score off the dribble. There was one where he came off a ball screen and had a snatchback crossover right to left, pulled up for three and knocked it down. So I'm just like, put that in my notes. All right, Patrick, I see you've been working on something there. But then also, too, did you notice, KC, there were a couple of times that he took the inbounds and brought the basketball up to initiate offense. And so I'm seeing what Billy is doing with Patrick and just trying to put him in different positions in terms of being a ball handler and creating or initiating offense. That could be a role that for him could potentially grow. We know that he has struggled with his ball handling in the past. And again, these guys all go into the offseason, into the lab with certain things that they want to get better at. But Billy having the trust in him, or at least trying to work that out through preseason, of Patrick bringing the basketball up and initiating offense was something that, again, I was putting in my notes like, okay, Pat's bringing up the ball to initiate offense. That's something that kind of stood out to me, KC.
Yeah, and you saw it with that with Matas too. I mean, Billy's talked about wanting a team full of ball handlers, and obviously Josh Giddey's going to have the ball in his hands the majority of the time. But, between Coby and Ayo and Trey Jones and, even Kevin Huerter, he's an economical dribbler, but he's smart with the basketball. So that did stand out to me about Patrick. But you bring up a good point about his ankle, and that's what I'm going to follow up with on Billy here today at practice, is like, did that play a factor in that decision? You also saw Josh Giddey sit out the second half. We'd heard over the weekend that Josh he wasn't limited, but they're just being precautious. Right. He did the non-contact portion of one of those practices last week in training camp, but then sat out the contact portion. So this is what you got to be smart in the preseason. You got to make sure everybody's healthy. Trey Jones started the second half for Josh, and Josh didn't play in the second half. And look, as we move, through these preseason games, Billy's going to try different rotations and different looks. And then, obviously as you get closer maybe to the finale, you're going to see him kind of play probably what you're going to see in the regular season rotation. But rematch with the Cavs Thursday with the home preseason opener. I know we'll both be out there. And we haven't talked about our guy _𝗀𝗀 𝗏. It was good to see him obviously out there and healthy. I know Kenny Atkinson told reporters in Cleveland last night, I was not there, but talked about, their plan is to kind of, keep him healthy throughout the season with a limited role, but he's more going to be impactful for the playoffs because we all saw their guard depth kind of get exposed a little bit in the playoffs last year, and he's just such a smart and winning player. So it'll be good to catch up with Lonzo on Thursday night at the United Center, and we'll be back in a building that we know very well. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to a preseason game number 2 for the Chicago Bulls against the Cleveland Cavaliers, running it back there. KC, I just got to throw a little caveat wrench into our, players that we came up with. I just want to throw honorable mention out to Yuki Kawamura and Javon Carter. Look, Javon Carter has been, I think he was born a bucket. I think when we even came out the womb, it was a basketball hoop right there. The doctor gave him a basketball, and he just went and got a bucket. Like, that dude is the consummate pro. So I just want to give love to Javon Carter really quickly. I mean, the three-pointers, the ability to score at the rim in a timely fashion for this Bulls team, and then Yuki just running the offense and what he was able to do. These dudes really came in. It's refreshing to see Yuki out there and having fun and just how he impacts the game. And KC, I know you sent some tweets about Yuki and just like, all right, we saw it last year in Memphis. We saw it in Summer League, and we're seeing it again. Like, this dude can play.
He bends defenses just with his constant dribble pressure. I mean, he just is so fast and always probing through open spaces. And I would love to play alongside that guy because he just creates shots with his ability to get into open spaces and continue to attack with the dribble and his speed. So I would love to play alongside him. I wasn't big on passing. I was pretty big on shooting.
KC was always shot ready, everybody. KC was always shot ready. KC's a lefty too. And so I'm always jealous of left-handed hoopers because I've never seen an awkward or uncoordinated left-handed basketball player. Like they're always moves. So like, I mean, if you're a lefty and I'm on your team, yes, I'm feeding you the ball. We're getting buckets because it's just so difficult guarding left-handed players.
Little known fact as we bore our listeners to tears, I only do two things left-handed. I shoot a basketball and I throw a baseball. I do everything else right-handed.
Wow.
So there you go. Yeah.
Look, all right, now I'm even more jealous of KC now because he's ambidextrous, right? Or as Shaquille O'Neal calls it, amphibious, him and Charles Barkley on his side of the NBA. But look, we appreciate everybody for tapping in to this week's edition of By the Horns. One preseason game down for the Bulls. They play again against the Cavs on Thursday at the United Center. And, you know, we'll unpack that along with the rest of the preseason games for this Bulls team. So for my man, 𝗻•C Johnson, I'm Cam Smith. Thanks for tapping in to the By the Horns pod.